Right now on Face the State, as Ned Lamont prepares to become our next governor, we talk with the man who wanted the job in his first interview since Election Day. What is Bob Stefanowski's message for Governor-elect Lamont? Why did he lose? And will he run again? The exclusive interview straight ahead. Plus, two Democrats with a different agenda than the new governor. State Representative Josh Elliott is with us, along with State Senator-elect Julie Kushner. Also, United Technologies splitting into three companies. The Hartford Business Journal's Greg Bordenara will tell us how these monumental changes will impact you. Our flashback, holiday shopping in downtown Hartford. It's all straight ahead this Sunday morning, December 2nd, 2018.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
A good Sunday morning to all of you. It's 8:30. I'm Dennis House. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. With us today, in his first interview since election night, former Republican candidate for governor, Bob Stefanowski. Mr. Stefanowski, thank you for being with us today.
Dennis, thanks for having me.
You know, someone who once lost a governor's race told me there are different stages. It's almost like the stages of grief. There's the shock and the tremendous disappointment that night.
Yeah.
And in your case, it was the next morning when you learned. What are you going through right now?
You do go through phases, but at the end of the day, we're pretty proud of what we did. We had 650,000 people that voted for us. That's more than any other candidate that I think Jody Rell, second time around. We had 70% of the city support us. From where we came from a year ago, where no one had ever heard of us, to where we ended up, we're pretty happy with what happened.
You're an analytical guy, a business guy. You like to study the numbers.
Yeah.
As you look at them, why do you think you lost?
I think there were a couple things. One was certainly Fairfield County. We underperformed. I think we underestimated the impact that Washington would have on this election. We truly believe that people would vote towards their own economic interest. The single mom who's working 12 hours a day, I was going to provide tax relief for that person. I think there's some sectors of Connecticut that have the luxury of not worrying about that. And they made a statement about Washington, and I think that kind of influenced the results.
Do you have any resentment toward President Trump for the pall that he cast over the election?
I don't think it was helpful, Dennis, but again, I'll stand with what I've been saying all along. Connecticut has some real problems. You saw this week United Technologies is breaking into three pieces. God knows what that's going to lead to. The banks came out in Fairfield County. They're requiring another 5% down on home purchases. We had a toll study come out a week after the election saying we're going to raise $1 billion from the taxpayers of Connecticut on tolls. We need to start thinking about what's going on in Connecticut. I'm hoping that Governor-elect Lamont does that.
To touch on UTC for just a moment, I just want to get your insight on this. We're going to be discussing this later in the program, but do you think it's bad for Connecticut, this split?
I think it depends where it goes. It certainly is troublesome. It makes it a lot easier for one division like Pratt & Whitney to move down to Florida, where they already have a presence. But I think it gets back to, Dennis, we have to create an environment in Connecticut where business wants to be here. Most of the rhetoric after the election has been about legalizing marijuana, raising the minimum wage by 50%, putting up tolls. We need to focus on the economy and getting jobs back, and I was hoping that I had moved the discussion in that direction.
You know, Democrats did gain seats in the House and the Senate, as you noted, and Governor Lamont, Governor-elect Lamont may be pulled to the left here by some of these new folks. What do you think about that?
He may have been better off with a minority, either in the House or the Senate. I think that's going to be a challenge for Mr. Lamont to try to stick to his campaign promises, to try to limit tolls to only tractor trailers, to try to cut the property tax and do all that without touching the CBAC agreement. It's going to be difficult. I do think he's going to try to do his best, and we'll see what happens. Let's
go back to election. I just want to walk through it. There was a while when people thought you were going to win.
Yeah.
Sort of late in the evening, then things shifted. What was it like in the control room for you guys?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting night. It was about 2 o'clock. I went to bed for a couple hours. We were up by 20,000 votes. And then I woke up a couple hours later. It was pretty much tied. As you know, there was a lot of discussion about some of the people being bussed in, but I thought the right thing to do Wednesday morning was to concede. The towns that weren't in yet were the big cities where I had a minority, and I thought it was probably best just put it behind us and get the election done so that we could get moving.
Mr. Lamont said that you offered your help and that you were very gracious. What kind of advice do you have for him?
Stick to your promises. I mean, what I heard towards the end of the debates was he's going to cut taxes. I heard that he's going to limit tolls to out-of-state tractor trailers. I heard that he was going to try to bring business back to Connecticut. Don't get so distracted by some of the other factors that are troublesome for our state. But the fundamental priority needs to be get this economy moving, and I'm hoping that he can do that.
Let's talk a little bit about the Republican Party, because if you analyze some of the numbers, they did poorly in places where they traditionally do well.
Yeah.
For instance, the 2nd Congressional District, they really didn't have a candidate running against Joe Courtney,
Yeah.
and also in the 4th and to a degree in the 5th.
Sure.
Should the party do a better job at recruiting some of these more prominent Republicans to run for federal office?
You know, it's interesting. After the primary, everybody said you did a great job, you had a unique strategy. After you lose an election like this, there's obviously some second guessing. It's not just a Connecticut thing. You saw it nationwide where there was a reaction to the Republican Party. I couldn't be happier with what the party did for me. J.R. Romano, the RTCs, they all stepped in, did the best that we could in a tough year across the country for Republicans.
Are you surprised that the Republicans lost seats in the House?
I was. I mean, I honestly thought going into this election, we would win the governor and we'd have a majority in the House and the Senate. And again, I think a lot of it gets back to the impact coming out of Washington. We did do a good job of getting the vote out. I had more votes than almost any other candidate. But the Democrats did a terrific job of getting the vote out as well. They were very well organized. I think that had an impact to it as well.
What is next for Bob Stefanowski?
I think it depends who you talk to. I'd like to stay involved. I mean, I got a very good sense of the issues facing our state. I met so many terrific people throughout the state. I'd like to stay involved to help influence policy in the right direction. We're at a critical time. I do wish Governor-elect Lamont the best. Anything I can do to support, but I do think it's got to be focused on getting this economy moving. We can't have 8 more years of what we've gone through. It's an absolutely critical time for the state. Anything I can do to help that, I'll be happy to do.
You heard the news from General Motors this week. Some say that it's a sign of a recession coming to this country. Do you believe that? And how will it impact Connecticut?
I think it's possible. You know, interest rates are coming up. We've got big deficits at the federal level. I would say it's more likely than not we have a recession in the next 4 years, which again gets back to me getting the right economic policy in Connecticut, getting businesses to come back here, reducing regulation. The disappointing thing to me since the election is you haven't heard a lot of discussion about that. What have you heard about? Legalizing marijuana, raising the minimum wage, putting up tolls. And it's not fair to Governor-elect Lamont yet because he's not even in office, but at some point that discussion needs to get back to getting this economy moving and helping the people in our towns have a good lifestyle.
John Rowland lost the first time he ran for governor. Dan Malloy lost the first time he ran for governor. Ned Lamont lost the first time he ran for governor. You lost the first time. Will you run again?
Again, it depends who you talk to. 4 years is a long time. If you're asked my kids, they'd say no way.
They're done with it?
It's a strain on the family. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting the people. I do think we moved the discussion. We had 2 people on the debate stage arguing over who the biggest tax cutters was going to be, a Democrat and a Republican. I'm glad we got to that point. I'm just hoping that Governor-elect follows through on some of these tax cuts.
So you're not ruling it out?
I wouldn't rule it out. 4 years is a long way from now, but I wouldn't say I'm going to either. We'll see what happens.
You met a lot of Republicans across the state. Who do you think the party should look toward to sort of pick up the mantle, maybe run again, run for governor next time around?
Well, you got Len Fasano in the House. You got them in the Senate. You got Len Fasano in the House. I was up against 5 good candidates. They all brought great things to the table. I'm sure someone else will surface by 4 years from now. But there's a lot of good candidates out there. I was very impressed with the quality of the party and the effort that they put into the election.
There are some who say that you would have been better off running with Jamie Stevenson or Aaron Stewart, but it was not your choice. Joe Markley won the primary, and even Aaron Stewart said, 2 white guys, it just didn't really help the party. Would you have been better off with a woman running mate, you think?
I like Joe Markley. Joe's been a friend for over a year now. I think that the election was largely the top of the ticket. I think in the primary, obviously there's more interest in the lieutenant governor candidate, but by the time you get to the general, I think it's largely the top of the ticket.
Bob Stefanowski, we thank you so much for being on the
program.
program.
Thanks for having me on.
Best of luck, and perhaps we'll see you on here again.
Thank you very much,
with an announcement,
Dennis.
you never know.
Appreciate our time together.
Take care. Thank you. When we come back, we will discuss the UTC split and also 2 Democrats who have a different agenda than Governor-elect Lamont. And we welcome your comments, and you can also watch past editions of Face the State on our YouTube channel or on our app.